Hey there, I'm April.
And I'm Missy, and this is our podcast, Sheelanagig. Hey everybody, welcome! Each week, of course, we present and explore our own Sheelanagig, a woman whose strength and perseverance has led her to greatness, who empowers us, inspires us. Maybe it's somebody you've heard of, maybe it's somebody you haven't heard of and should know more about, or maybe it's somebody you have heard of and should know more about. I don't know, but either way, yeah, we were just like excited to share these Sheelas with you, right? Aren't we, April?
They're always cool, that I will tell you.
Yes. We like to say we're kind of purveyors of women's stories, and of course empowerment, and we're just here to share the love, man, share it, yeah, and share, you know, the inspiration. We are so inspired by these women. It's crazy. Their stories are crazy, and everybody should know. They're so good. Yeah.
Definitely. But before we get into today's Sheela, what's going on with you? Anything new?
Well, my oldest friend in LA, one of my best friends in the whole world, is getting married at my gig tomorrow.
Oh my God.
I know. So I play in a traditional Irish pub band that I've played in for 25 years called Paddy's Pig, here in Los Angeles. And we do this gig on New Year's Eve day every year. It's New Year's in the UK. It's at a British pub, so it's 4 p.m. is British, or I should say New Year's in the UK. And she has decided that, well, she and her partner have been together for 25 years, Laura and Joe. Shout out to Laura and Joe.
Well, I'm glad they're not rushing into anything.
They're not rushing into anything. And she's finally said, okay, we're doing this. You know, health insurance, new president. We just need to like get this shit done. We're getting married. She let me know like a week ago. What? She said, what's your schedule? I need you to be my witness. So as it turned out, you know, we're both very busy, and we do this gig, like I said, every year on New Year's during the day. And she said, can't we just get married at your gig? And I was like, fuck yeah. Fuck yeah, you can get married at our gig. This is amazing.
I love the bridesmaid's outfit. What are you wearing to the wedding, Missy?
Well, I think we're all going to wear David Bowie t-shirts because Laura loves David Bowie. And, we have some special things planned for sure. By the time you hear this, it'll be well over. But, we have a lot of special things planned. We have cake. We have champagne. We have, you know, she gets a free band. I mean, come on, you know.
It's what for more?
Yeah, but I'm just so delighted. I love them both so much, and they're such an amazing couple, and it's such an honor that they're getting married at our gig. Yay, hooray. What a great way to bring in the new year, right?
Yeah, and all these unsuspecting people that are coming to hear you, they're just going to have a blast.
I know,
Not to mention champagne and cake.
I know. The other thing I want to mention, before I forget, I got together with our old neighbors last night. We always do cookie day together. It's a family of 6 children. I've watched all these kids grow up. They lived next to me for 23 years. And so the girls came over last night, and we did our annual cookie day. And Mercedes had graduated from UCLA. This is 2012. She graduated from UCLA, and we were invited to the family graduation ceremony, which was really an honor. So we were there, and the keynote speaker was
none other than
than Dolores Huerta, and we just did a podcast episode on Dolores Huerta. If you have not listened to it, you probably should check it out. Amazing woman. And what's funny is because I was mentioning this to them, and she said, "Missy, you heard her speak?" What? I totally remember how inspired I was by that speaker, how wonderful she was. I remember thinking, who is that? She's amazing, but did not even realize it was her. It was Dolores. She told me, and I was, oh my gosh, I've heard her speak. So that was kind of an honor. But enough about me. What's up with you, April?
Well, I'm so excited to talk about my Sheela.
Oh, she's so excited that she even got the date wrong. Yeah. So we weren't supposed to record till next Monday.
I was, but I showed up a week early.
She did. She texted me. She's like, I'm 5 minutes away. I'm getting gas. I'm like, what? 5 minutes away from what? What?
From your house.
We're not on the schedule until next Monday. But I was excited. I'm like, come on over. We'll make this happen. Let's do it.
So I'm so excited to share about my Sheela today.
Yay!
It's a little bit of I have unfinished business about it, so this is kind of a conversation that I'm excited to have.
Okay, me too.
But let's start with 2020 to 2021. When you think about that time globally, not so much in our own personal lives, although our personal lives were clearly wrapped into this, what kind of things come to mind?
The freaking pandemic.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Having to homeschool my kids.
Yeah.
Really sadly losing my dad to COVID.
Oh, yeah.
Which totally sucked. I mean, there were so many hard things about that time. So many.
There were, yeah.
Yeah.
And can you think about another sort of more global awareness bad thing, something that sucked, that came into our consciousness because we were all home and maybe paying attention more to media?
Well, there was a lot of shit going on out in the world. George Floyd, right? George Floyd, that whole thing. Oh my God.
Yeah.
It's horrifying.
And the whole Black Lives Matter consciousness and awareness. And so anyway, that's sort of the starting point for talking about my Sheela today, because in 2021, it turns out that PepsiCo acquired the Aunt Jemima brand from Quaker Oats Company.
Wow. Okay.
And PepsiCo made a decision, along with Mars Food Service and B&G Foods, that it was time to retire iconic logos and branding around their products, because all three of these companies had African American branding around African Americans whose origins were slavery.
Yeah.
And who were sitting there smiling, cooking up great things for what was a predominantly white culture at the time.
Ugh.
So Quaker Oats returned to the original name for the pancake line of Pearl Milling Company, and I'll go into a little bit about Pearl Milling Company in a little bit. Mars Food Service retired Uncle Ben to Ben's Original for all of their converted rice products, and B&G Foods got rid of the Black Chef from Cream of Wheat line of Farina porridge.
Thank God,
all
right?
at the same time around 2021.
Right.
But when you think about it, and you wonder, where did these logos and these symbols come from? I don't know about the other two products, where Uncle Ben or where the Cream of Wheat Chef came from, but I have learned a little bit about Aunt Jemima, the origins of Aunt Jemima.
Wow.
And the very first model to represent Aunt Jemima was named Nancy Green.
Okay.
And before I tell you about Nancy Green herself, because there's sort of a two-pronged thing here, it was the intention of the brand, what Aunt Jemima was meant to represent, and then who this woman was who gave life and breath and personality to the Aunt Jemima image.
Right. How interesting.
Yeah, the whole thing is interesting.
Well, you don't even think about necessarily that it was based on a real person. But obviously she was based on a real person.
Well, actually, that's interesting, because she was actually based on fiction.
Okay.
Only a real person personified her.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
This is interesting. This is deep, man.
Yeah, it is. I found this really deep, really interesting, and worth a dive, but it left in some ways more questions than answers.
Right.
So it actually started with a song that was popular in 1870s by Billy Cursands called Old Aunt Jemima.
Wow.
And two men who had just acquired a milling company, their names were Chris Rutt and Charles Underwood, decided to name their new self-rising pancake flour Aunt Jemima. Well, it turns out these dudes were better at having a promotional concept than actually executing it.
Okay.
So they ended up selling this failing company to R.T. Davis Mill Company in St. Joseph, Missouri. And when R.T. Davis Mill Company in Missouri acquired this, somebody, Charles Jackson, who was a food wholesaler, went out to find and discover a real-life Aunt Jemima to create this image around around this product and brand. And True confessions, I have this affinity for the Aunt Jemima image, but to me, I certainly didn't intend to or think that I was being racist.
Right.
I had a dream about Aunt Jemima like 20 years ago, and what I was seeing was this strong, powerful woman who was so rooted in who she was, she didn't buy into any BS,
Right.
whether it was racist or not. And so I had Aunt Jemima dolls that for me represented power and love and just a earthiness. They were Mammy dolls, and
Which were big in the South. My grandmother was from New Orleans, and she had some Mamie dolls. I remember.
They
Yeah.
were. And what I realized in doing this research is that there was an old South plantation nostalgia, and it was romantic around this image. And I was as captivated by the image as anybody else.
Sure.
Not really thinking about it as a racist symbol.
I understand what you mean, because like the ones my grandma had were handmade, and they were beautiful. She actually had one that had that covered her toaster, and it had this full beautiful dress that went over the toaster, and then so it. And I always thought it was beautiful. I thought this is beautiful, not really realizing the racist stigma about these things. I know.
And so it was so interesting to see, well, wait a minute, I fell down that well along with many other people and not really thought about its racist origins.
Right.
But when PepsiCo was retiring this brand, a bunch of articles and commentary came up around how Aunt Jemima got started, and also Nancy Green, who she was, because her image was so divergent from or disassociated from the Aunt Jemima brand, even though, as you'll see, Nancy Green was Aunt Jemima in many ways. But Richey Richardson, and I hope I'm pronouncing her name right, was or is still an associate professor of Africana Studies and Research Center at Cornell University, wrote in a New York Times article in 2015, and that's why I'm not sure if she's still with Cornell or not, but in 2015 she was, and she wrote that this image, the Aunt Jemima image, was grounded in an idea about the Mammy's devotion and submissive servitude, who eagerly nurtured children of her white master and mistresses while neglecting her own. Mostly because she was spending her full days around raising white children and nurturing white children. And the personification of this image is so warm and loving and always smiling and always kind, as opposed to resentful and,
Sure. Yeah.
And so it really was this iconic image that people were in love with. And Quaker Oats Company understood that the importance of that brand and the powerfulness of that brand, and they wanted a real-life living black woman instead of a white man in blackface drag, which was more of the common practice of the day. And the intention was meant to reinforce the product's authenticity and origin, which was a real ex-slave. But the company created a backstory for Aunt Jemima that was completely fictional.
Okay.
So here comes the fiction, the made-up story of Aunt Jemima.
Okay.
The brand put her in a tiny cabin in Louisiana, where she was a loyal cook for Colonial Higby, a plantation owner on the Mississippi. When Union soldiers during the Civil War threatened to rip off his mustache, Aunt Jemima diverted them with her pancakes long enough for the Colonial to escape the assault, and the troops were so taken by her cooking, they urged her to come north and share her recipe.
Oh my God! Wait, why were they were going to rip off his mustache?
Yes.
Why?
Because it had something to do with the Civil War.
Was it a fake mustache? That's the only way you can really rip off a mustache, right? I'm so confused. Oh my God. So, okay.
But it was some kind of revenge on the Civil War or something about the Civil War.
But instead she charmed them with her fabulous pancakes.
Distracted them. And they were so distracted they forgot all about Colonial Higby, who Aunt Jemima heroically saved She was loyal to her, to
the slaveholder.
Yes.
Oh my God! I'm sure he treated her wonderfully.
But wait, it gets worse. The legend went on to say, and I quote, "Those who knew her best, who knew her even from the time when she first came up from her little cabin home, they found her still the simple, earnest, smiling Mammy. It was all the same to her."
Oh my God. Oh my God. Of course.
Isn't that horrible?
It is.
This fictional backstory was the work and creation of a guy named James Webb Young, and he was an advertising executive and illustrator. And in the promotional material they created around the Aunt Jemima image, they had a tagline, "The cook whose cabin became more famous than Uncle Tom's." And of course, the reference to Uncle Tom's Cabin was from the abolitionist novel by Harriet Beecher Stowe.
Of course, yeah.
And so it kind of perversed that whole thing, because abolition was obviously anti-slavery, and yet this is reinforcing slavery. Mm-hmm. So in a lot of ways, it felt like a backward step.
Right.
But Charles Jackson was looking for his live Mammy, and he discovered Nancy Green in 1890. She was the cook for the family of Charles M. Walker, Jr., and Walker was a Chicago councilman and judge, and on the recommendation of Judge Walker, Nancy Green was hired by the R.T. Davis Milling Company in St. Joseph, Missouri, to represent their Aunt Jemima. And when
So she wasn't a slave per se. She was in the North.
I'm going to get to Nancy's story in a minute, but this is still like the creation of this brand, this image, which was based on slavery.
Okay.
You know, she was a slave who came north because everybody loved her pancakes, and it was just the same.
Right. You did say that. She came north because of, okay, got it. Right. Okay.
But when Nancy Green was first discovered, she was a freed slave who worked for the Walker family. She was caring for his sons, Charles and Samuel, and all of the sons and the family and the friend's family all loved her pancakes.
Okay.
So that was sort of the link between this Aunt Jemima made-up brand and this actual African-American woman, Nancy Green.
Okay.
And she was one of the first African-American models hired to promote an American product. She was 59 at the time when she made her Aunt Jemima debut at the 1893 World's Fair Columbian Exposition that was held in Chicago that year.
Okay.
And they had her standing beside the world's largest flour barrel. It was 24 feet high. And she operated a pancake cooking display. She sang songs and promoted the product. And she wore an iconic kerchief on her head and a shawl around her shoulders. And the company actually offered ragdoll representations of her and sold those at a premium. And this campaign of her flipping pancakes and singing soulful songs and doing this routine was phenomenally successful. As Aunt Jemima, Nancy Green was they said she was like this promotional bonanza. People flocked to her. She flipped flapjacks in her flour barrel-shaped pavilion. She flipped flapjacks in her flour barrel-shaped pavilion while she sang spirituals and other obligatory tunes about historical plantation servitude under her benevolent white masters. And it was
everybody ate it up.
And everybody ate it up. As legend has it, Green was said to have sold 50,000 boxes of that now famous pancake mix. She became the trusted face of the Aunt Jemima brand. Back then, journalist Marcus Hayes noted that anybody who would look at an African-American woman cooking knew they could trust her cooking, that she was a good cook. That was the stereotype that people just fell in love with and bought pancakes from.
Wow. Okay.
So you might be wondering, who is this Nancy Green?
Yes, who is this Nancy Green?
And I got to tell you, as fascinated as I am by this whole story, again, there were more question marks than answers. Most biographers believe that she was born into slavery on March 4th, 1834 in Sterling, Kentucky, but there were no official birth certificates for slaves. So there was no formal documentation.
Yeah.
And the 1900 census lists her birth year in 1854, which is a 20-year discrepancy. You're like, what's 20 years if it's a slave? You know?
God.
That kind of thing. There was just no great records. Local farmers from the area who bore the name Green raised tobacco, hay, cattle, and hogs in the Kentucky area. But there were no birth certificates, as I said, or marriage license. So she was believed to have been married for 30 years to a man named George Green. And she was said to have at least 2 and possibly 4 children. But by the end of the Civil War, it's widely believed that both her husband and all of her children were lost.
Oh my God.
And I think that, the presumption is during the war that they didn't survive the war. But again, no death certificates, no marriage license, no birth certificates. So we really don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But she was believed to have gained her freedom from slavery in 1900 and was hired as a nanny and housekeeper by Charles M. Walker's father before that family relocated to Chicago. And so when they did, he took Green, and it's believed that she lived in a wood frame shack that was still standing as of 2014. We don't know if it's still...
How nice that he made her own little wood shack.
Wasn't that generous?
Wow.
Yeah. And that shack was behind a grand home on Main Street in Covington, Kentucky. Well, that was where she lived, I guess, before she went to Chicago with the Green family.
Okay.
So she moved with the Walkers from Kentucky to Chicago in the early 1870s before the birth of Samuel's youngest son in 1872. And the Walker family initially settled in a swank residential district near Ashland Avenue and Washington Boulevard that was called Kentucky Colony, and that was where many transplanted Kentuckians lived in Chicago.
Okay.
But here's the part that's most frustrating to me about Nancy Green's story. We don't know why she accepted the role of Aunt Jemima.
Well, I mean, I do. I was thinking about that, you know. It was an opportunity. I'm sure they paid her something.
They paid her something, yes. The blacks in Chicago were mostly freed or were freed slaves, but I think it's not so
She had
much
been a slave, though, right?
Yeah, she had been a slave.
Right.
She earned her freedom.
And this is probably an opportunity for her to have some autonomy,
Definitely.
make money from something that wasn't from, a family that she worked for.
I would like to think that the people that were in that position, freed slaves, really were facing a lot of racism, and it was easier sort of to just go along and comply, but maybe not really like or accept the status. But here's what's interesting.
Yeah.
Here's what you don't know about Nancy Green, and I am so little is written about this, and this is making me nuts. She was said to be a very strong voice at the Olivet Baptist Church in Chicago, which was the city's oldest black congregation. And the church was noted for its work both shielding those who had escaped slavery who arrived in Chicago, because there were still many slave catchers in Chicago that were pursuing people of African American descent or African descent. And the church membership at the time was 9,000. It was a huge church.
Wow. Yeah.
And the church did its best to shield those individuals. And Nancy Green was said to be one of the founding members. And one commentary said she was a minister and a philanthropist.
Ooh, wow.
Which implied she both had money and a microphone, that she had influence. So some of the things, and we'll get to the money in a little bit, but the first question is, if she was a spokesperson, which there is some suggestion that she was, did her employer either not know she was going against the Aunt Jemima brand when she was speaking out mostly for, she was all about social and economic mobility for Black women in her time. She was a
Wow.
real advocate. So was it quiet enough that her company didn't realize it? Or was she quiet so that she wasn't that visible? Was she using the benefits? I mean, she did get some kind of financial compensation for her role as Aunt Jemima.
Sure hope so. Jesus.
Well, there's controversy there. I'm going to get to that. But the question was how she traveled, both for her job, and it's possible that she traveled for the church. Not clear, not sure. So
Well, don't you think probably those communities in some ways were very insular too at that
they
time?
probably were, and it could be that the white community that employed her was completely oblivious to...
That's kind of what I would imagine.
And that would make sense. But in all of the writing, I mean, in 2021, when PepsiCo retired the Aunt Jemima brand, there were a lot of articles about her, but very, very limited, sketchy information. And this is where it really captured my imagination and curiosity, because it seemed like she was powerful, unafraid, uninhibited, and she stood up to them when they wanted her to travel. I'll tell you a little bit more about that.
Yeah.
On a plane. She was not getting on a plane.
Wow. Okay.
I'll get there. But Romy Crawford, who teaches or taught, again, this is going back to 2021, African American visual imagery at the School of the Art Institute in Chicago, was the only reference that I found who gave an interview in 2021 to WBEZ in Chicago about Nancy Green, who said the absolute irony was that she was playing a role, a derogatory type of caricature of Black women, when in actuality, this Black woman was moving around the country and in a way the world.
Right.
Her actual mobility in so many ways defied the Stasius of the caricature.
It's so fascinating.
Isn't it? And that was the only account that I read that really pointed to the disparity. And my question was, I know that as Aunt Jemima, she was traveling all over the country, all over America. But was she also traveling on behalf of the church? I'm obsessed with her work in the church because it did defy this caricature.
Well, it is fascinating. You know, I mean, obviously it was a high price to pay. Mm-hmm. A very high price to pay, but ultimately one that helped her, you know, have a voice.
Definitely.
That's what's so interesting about it. Mm-hmm. And I can imagine her going on the road, and again, I'm completely speculating about this, but, you know, going on the road as Aunt Jemima around the country, but then, you know, in the evening, maybe she would find the local Black church. But, you know, how other people were reacting to that is another question, too, because, wow.
Yeah.
What a story, April.
Isn't it interesting?
Yeah.
So one report I read said that her financial freedom and stature as a national spokesperson enabled her to become a leading advocate against poverty in favor of equal rights for the Black population. But there's a wide discrepancy about how much money Green actually earned for her Aunt Jemima portrayal. And she was the first Aunt Jemima, and she would draw crowds. It's widely reported that she was offered a lifetime contract to represent Aunt Jemima, and that she made a fortune with this contract. But in reality...
Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah. She only held the role for 20 years. And it's unclear, as you will see, whether she was let go or she resigned. It's more likely, it seems, that she simply worked for the company and earned a salary, and it might have been a good salary. I'm imagining it was better than what, a lot of African American women were working in Chicago as house domestics and things like that were making at the time. But in the 1910 census, as she described herself as a housekeeper and missionary for the historic Olivet Baptist Church in Chicago. And by this time, she had already parted ways with her role as Aunt Jemima. So she obviously didn't have a lot of money if she's still working as a housekeeper or defining her work as a housekeeper. The company claimed Green made enough money as Aunt Jemima to provide her children, who most accounts said were dead before she ever left Kentucky.
Yeah, that's what I thought you said. Yeah.
Right? They said that she provided for her children and bought a 22-room house where she rented rooms to boarders. And it was said that in 1939 she earned the fine sum of $1,200 for 2 weeks of work as an advertising model for a grain merchant. And she rented an apartment in a 4-flat with Washington Park with her daughter and son-in-law and 2 grandchildren.
Isn't that a good story?
Yeah, which we're really not sure ever happened. But what we do know is that the president and chairman of Quaker Oats, John Stewart, had a home in Sheridan Road in Winnetka, Illinois. He did not take in boarders. So even if she did make some money and purchase property, she was still taking in boarders and defining herself as a housekeeper. So it doesn't sound like she made all that much money.
No, it doesn't. I am going down the rabbit hole after this. This is fascinating. This is absolutely freaking fascinating, April.
It's really interesting. So sadly, in 1923, on August 30th, she was believed to be 89 years old, living with a great-nephew and his wife, when she was hit by a car that collided with a laundry truck and ricocheted onto the sidewalk, and she died.
Oh.
She was buried in
Nancy.
Oakwood Cemetery in an unmarked grave until 2015.
Why? Till
It would
2015?
imply that she was living again in poverty, that there wasn't enough of money maybe to bury her properly.
Who took care of the unmarked grave?
I'm not sure. I don't have a lot about this. There's a lot, but there is a story about her grave because Sherry Williams, a Bronzeville historian, led a campaign to place a stone depicting her as the first and original Aunt Jemima. And Sherry Williams spent 15 years in this effort.
Hells yeah, Sherry. We love you, Sherry. Shout out.
Yeah, as the Brownsville Historical Society was dedicated to preserving African American culture in Chicago. And in her role, Sherry Williams searched for a descendant of Green to grant permission to place the headstone on her grave. And it said that a great-nephew came forward and granted that permission. So when she got the permission to put the headstone on, she reached out to Quaker Oats to see if they would support the monument for Green's grave as Aunt Jemima. And the corporate response was, wait for it, Nancy Green and Aunt Jemima aren't the same. That Aunt Jemima is a fictitious character, and without the support of Quaker Oats, the headstone was placed on Nancy Green's grave on September 5th, 2020.
Oh, Quaker Oats. Oh, that's the last time I'm buying oatmeal. Fuck that shit.
Well, it's now sold to PepsiCo, but if you know.
Oh, I'm sure they're really nice.
Oh,
they're
yeah.
a really good company. Yeah.
But for all the years that Nancy Green served as, the 20 years that she served as Aunt Jemima, and for all the years after, Quaker Oats never mentioned Nancy Green or gave her credit for the success of their iconic brand.
Oh, Quaker Oats. You suck.
Aunt Jemima, the character, would outlast Green for another 97 years on labels and boxes. And in the year that followed Green, they had other models take her place. And over time, they began inching away from some of the racist stereotypes that defined the original character of Aunt Jemima. For example, in '68, it revamped the trademark and replaced Aunt Jemima's kerchief with a headband and allowed a slimmer profile. In '89, it gave her a more contemporary look by adding pearl earrings and a lace collar. According to the brand's website, it also updated Aunt Jemima to a more stylish, middle-class African-American woman as opposed to a former slave. In 2014, a lawsuit was filed against Quaker Oats, PepsiCo, and others claiming that Green and another model, Aunt Jemima model named Anna Short Harrington, were exploited by the company and cheated out of the monetary compensation that they were promised.
Sure sounds like it to me.
Yeah. We're pretty sure that Nancy Green sold a lot more pancakes and pancake products than she was compensated for.
And what's the other woman's name again?
Anna Short Harrington.
Do you know anything about her?
I don't. There were quite a few models after Nancy Green that served as Aunt Jemima. The plaintiffs were two of Harrington's great-grandsons, and they sought a multi-million-dollar settlement for both Green and Harrington, but the lawsuits were rapidly dismissed by the courts. It went nowhere.
Oh, God.
As for marking Nancy Green's grave, Williams said that she hoped to hold a ceremony for Green at the cemetery. I don't know if that ever happened. But she also made the case not to forget the Aunt Jemima image. She was said, history does not simply disappear when you remove the Aunt Jemima image and the brand name. Aunt Jemima is a representative of the countless Black women who were and are essential workers. And she added Nancy Green in particular was the ideal woman to salute.
Wow.
So,
Nancy Green, we love you.
Yeah, I wish we knew more about her. One of the reasons why she is my Sheila is because of her activism in her church. And while she may have personified a stereotype of the freed slave who continued to work for those who indentured her and who she served, the white dominant class of the time, she actually did what she could in her time to take care of her own. And I wish
who she really was belied that image completely.
Exactly. I wish we knew more, but I wanted to bring her story out again.
Yeah, and we want to hear from you because I'm sure people listening know more or want to share more with us, and we would love that. We're always looking for people to interview. If you're somebody who's really, studied this or knows this or is part of her family or, we're always looking for great interviews and information. Give us your comments. Give us your ideas, your questions.
Anything about Nancy
Green,
please tell us.
This is an opportunity for that. This is an opportunity for more conversation. And that's important. It's really important with these Sheilas that we create more conversations. Wow. An amazing woman. Amazing. Wow. I'm totally fascinated. I'm still processing. I need to sit down and process and do some research myself. And that's what I love about this podcast. Like it always inspires me.
Yeah, to want to know more.
Yeah. I hope you feel that way too. I know this is a little bit off the subject, but I was, there was different syrups, and I was always a big fan of the Mrs. Butterworth syrup, which again, I think was based on
another character.
Racist stereotype. Yes. And I remember the bottle very well because it was this dark brown bottle, and it was, basically her in this dark brown bottle. You could see, her skirt and her kerchief and her, And I always thought it was a really cool bottle as a kid because it looked like a person.
But I think that's part of the dilemma is that how do you divorce a racial stereotype from what is
again when you don't know better, like as like a child, like you and I were talking about with my family being from Louisiana and my grandma having all these Mammy dolls, handmade beautiful dolls.
Loving them.
Yeah. And playing with them as a child and thinking they were beautiful and not really realizing what that was.
Yep.
I remember being older, like growing older and learning about things and feeling kind of guilty. I would have these little guilty feelings of,
I guess what I'm wondering is how do we switch to appreciation and honor from disrespect and racism?
And can you?
And can you?
Is it even possible?
Is it ours to do,
Yeah, is it ours to even, it is not. It really, as a white person, it's really not ours to.
Probably not.
I don't believe it is. But this has just been fascinating. This has been absolutely fascinating. Oh, Nancy Green. Green, right? Go look up Nancy Green.
And shout out to Jean Sullivan who gave me this Sheila.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, Jean. Jean, of course, is Dana, who is our editor, her amazing husband, Jean Sullivan, who also plays in my Irish band, Patty's Pig, with me.
Right.
Yeah. And again, exciting to play a wedding tomorrow.
Yes.
In addition to New Year's in the UK. But thank you for listening as always. We are delighted to have you here with us. We got a lot of fun stuff coming up in 2025, including some amazing interviews. I don't want to give it all away.
Yes.
But yeah, we're super excited for the new year. And please reach out. We really want to build this conversation. We really want to hear from you. We want to, know more about the Sheilas you'd like us to cover or that you want to share with us. So please reach out. We want to hear from you.
We do.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
And love you guys. Bye.